Good morning, everyone, or good day, everyone. So, in this video, we will learn about the quantity of heat. Okay, so our lesson objectives for this lesson is first, relate internal energy and heat, explain quantity of heat, solve problems using the formula about quantity of heat, and define specific heat. Now, what is heat? So heat, or which is denoted by Q, is the total kinetic energy of all molecules. It depends on the mass and energy of the particles. So heat, kung ano siya, depende ni siya sa mass ug sa energy sa particles. So I will give you a scenario. So it was a rainy afternoon. So it was a bit cold, so you decide to make coffee. So the temperature of the coffee is about 80 degrees Celsius. And then you put your metal spoon on the coffee, and after some time, you noticed that the tip of the spoon was much warmer. So, question number one: which way did the heat flow and why? Okay, so I'll give you some time to think about that. Okay, so the answer is from the coffee to the spoon. Okay, so you must remember that heat flow or heat transfer occurs from higher temperature to lower temperature. So in this case, in this example, the coffee is much warmer than your spoon. So it would be the path of the heat would be from the coffee to the spoon. So next question. So when will the flow of heat stop? So kano sa man siya mundang? Okay, I'll give you some time to think of an answer. Okay, so heat the flow of heat will stop when the coffee and the spoon will have the same temperature. Okay, so the heat flow will stop once the temperature of both the coffee and the spoon will be equal. So dira na mag-stop, dili na siya mo occur. So last question. So what is it called when heat no longer flows? So unsa may tawag ana? Okay, so the answer would be that is called thermal equilibrium. So when this temperature balances out, heat stops flowing, then the system or the set of systems, in this case kaning ato ang coffee ug ang ato ang spoon, it is said to be in thermal equilibrium. So if naamoy uyab nga cold og hands tas ikaw kay warm og hand, then perfect din kay mo kay mag-reach og thermal equilibrium inig mag holding hands mo. Char. Okay, so now we are asking the real questions here. So what is the difference between heat and temperature? Okay, so first of all is the difference between these two quantities is heat is measured in joules and temperature is measured in Celsius, Fahrenheit, Kelvin, or Rankine. Next, heat is a form of energy called thermal energy. So, since heat is measured in joules, it is energy. So, temperature on the other hand is not an energy but the thermal state of a physical body or system. Okay, so kani si temperature, it dili siya energy, it is a state. Okay? Next, heat is not a fundamental property of matter, while temperature is a fundamental property of matter. Meaning ana kanang tanang kanang tanang temperature sa isa ka material kay naagi na siya, it's innate. Naa na siya sa iya. Okay, so heat transfer is the reason behind temperature change. So katong example nato nga katong ni heat ang temperature sa spoon, so that ang cause ana that was because of heat transfer. So temperature variation can be the result of gain or loss of heat. Okay, so in layman's term, so heat is the energy transferred from a hotter body to a cooler one, while the temperature is the degree of hotness or coldness of a substance. Okay, so how is heat measured? So first we have calorie, which is the amount of heat required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree. Next, we have the kilocalorie, or denoted by kcal, which is equal to 1,000 calories. We also have the British Thermal Unit, or the BTU, which is the quantity of heat required to raise the temperature of 1 pound of water by 1 degree. So, ang kalahian sa calorie ug sa British Thermal Unit or sa BTU kay ang calorie 1 gram of water. Ang sa British Thermal Unit kay 1 pound of water. Okay, so here are some of the conversions. First, we have 1 or 1 calorie is equal to 4.186 joules. So 1 kilocalorie is equal to 1,000 calorie, which is equal to 4,186 joules. And 1 BTU is equal to 778 feet dot pound, which is equal to 252 calorie, which is equal to 1,055 joules. So kaning sa BTU, this isn't usually used in the SI unit, so we will just deal with calorie and the kilocalorie, but you just put this in the back of your mind, pero dili ra ta magamit ana. Okay, now specific heat. So what is specific heat? So specific heat is the amount of energy needed to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of a substance by 1 degree Celsius. So it is also the ability of a substance to absorb heat, and this property can help identify a substance. So putting all of the relationships together, we have Q is equal to mc delta T, where Q is the amount of heat, M is the mass, C is the specific heat of the material, and delta T is the change in temperature, or T2, simply T2 minus T1. Okay, so you have to put this, you have to remember this equation, because we will use this in during our problem solving. Okay, so here's an example. An 80 kilogram man had a fever of 39 degrees Celsius instead of the normal body temperature of 37 degrees Celsius. Assuming that the human body is mostly water, how much heat is required to raise his temperature by that amount? Okay, so let's list the given. We have the mass, which is equal to 80 kilograms. We also have the initial temperature, which is equal to 37 degrees Celsius, or we convert it into Kelvin, it becomes 310.15 Kelvin. We also have the final temperature, or T2, which is equal to 39 degrees Celsius. And we convert it again into Kelvin, it is equal to 312.15 Kelvin. So, since we assume that the human body is mostly water, so we will use the value of the specific heat of water, which is equal to 4,190 joules per kilogram dot Kelvin. So, specific heat is kanang depends on the material. It is constant. So, dili na siya mag-ilis-ilis. So, the specific heat of water will always be this value regardless of the mass. Okay? So, yeah. So, what is asked? So, ingon dere, how much heat is required to raise his temperature by that amount? So, ang atong pangitaon is ang value sa Q. So, now, what is the formula? So, the formula is Q equals mc delta T. Okay, so, mo na siyang atong formula nga gipakita ganiha. And now, after we knew the formula, we are going to solve for the solution. So Q equals mc delta T, then Q equals M times the specific heat of water times the change in temperature, or T2 minus T1. Then now we just plug in um, the values for those. We have the mass, 80 kilograms times 4,190 joules per kilogram that Kelvin, times 312.15 Kelvin minus 310.15 Kelvin. Now, nganong gi kuan man nato to? Nganong gi-convert man nato ang temperature nga degree Celsius to Kelvin? That is because ang ato ang specific heat sa water, ang iyahang unit is, if you may have noticed, is joule per kilogram dot Kelvin. So we need to convert those temperatures to Kelvin aron makancel nato na siya during our calculations. So going back to the problem, so multiply all those quantities, and then we have 80 kilograms times 4,190 joules per kilogram dot Kelvin times 2 Kelvin. Kay gi-minus na to ang 312.15 Kelvin minus 310.15 Kelvin. Okay, so now, using your calculator, you should get 6.7 times 10 to the power of 5 joules. So we will write the final answer. Q is equal to 6.7 times 10 to the power of 5 joules. So did you get the same answer, or lahiin yung nakuha? So if lahiin yung nakuha, then you must review how yun sa ninyo pagbutang ang value sa inyong calculator. Okay, so let's have another example. So, a 15.0 gram piece of cadmium metal absorbs 134 joules of heat while rising from 24 degrees Celsius to 62.7 degrees Celsius. So, calculate the specific heat of cadmium. Okay, so first, let's list the given. So, M is equal to 15.0 grams. Q is 134 joules, T1 is 24 degrees Celsius, and T2 is 62.7 degrees Celsius. Okay, so what is asked? So, ang gipangita diri is ang specific heat of cadmium. Okay, so muna siya ang asked. Now, what is the formula? So, the formula, the initial formula or the original formula is Q equals MC delta T. So, unsaan man nato na para mapagawas CC. CC na lang ang mabilin sa pikas. So, we have to divide both sides by M delta T. So, now we have the specific heat of cadmium is equal to Q over M delta T. Okay? So, we have the specific heat of cadmium is equal to Q over M times ang delta T is T2 minus T1. Okay, so now that we have our formula, we are going to proceed to solving for the solution. Okay, so we just plug in the values of those sa given. So we have the Q equals 134 joules over 15.0 grams times 62.7 degrees Celsius minus 24 degrees Celsius. Okay, so plug those in your scientific calculators, then you should get specific heat of cadmium equals 0.231 joules per gram degree Celsius. So, nga nang wala man nato ni gi-convert. Okay? Kay, okay naman nga, since ang iyahang gamit na unit for mass is grams, tapos ang same temperature is degrees Celsius, then we can just write that as it is, like joule per gram degree Celsius. Now, we will write the final answer. It is equal to 0.2231 joule per grams degree Celsius. So, kinsa may nakakuha og kuan? Did you get your answer like this or ingani nyo nakuha. If not, then again, you should review how you input those values in your scientific calculator. Okay, so this will be the last example. So, a 10.7 gram crystal of sodium chloride has an initial temperature of 37.0 degrees Celsius. So, what is the final temperature of the crystal if 147 calorie of heat were supplied to it? So, first, we will list the given. So, we have the mass, which is equal to 10.7 grams, and then we convert it into kilograms. It will become 1.07 times 10 to the power of negative 2 kilograms. We also have heat. Pila man ang giingon dire? We have 147 calories of heat. So if we convert those kaning 147 calories into joules, kay kailangan man na ang unit sa heat is in joules. So if you go back to our previous slides, or yeah, sa bago pa ning kuan, naay conversions dito. Remember, if you remember that, nag-take note mo ato, so nato conversion. So 147 calorie is equal to 615.342 joules. Then we also have the initial temperature, which is equal to 37.0 degrees Celsius. And if we convert na to na into Kelvin, we have 310.15 Kelvin. So, we also have the specific heat of salt, which is equal to 879 joule per kilogram that Kelvin. So now, if mangutana mo, asa man nagikan si Ma'am Ana nga value? So, I will upload the list of the most common most common materials and their specific heat. So, ako na siya i-upload sa atong Google Classroom, and then you can use that as a reference for your worksheets. Okay, so what is asked? So, what is asked in this problem? So, ang gipangita diri kay the final temperature. Unsa man ang final temperature? It is T2. Okay? Now, this is the formula. Q equals MC delta T. So, diri ra gid ta magsugod sa ato ang formula, and then we just manipulate it to find what is asked. Okay, so Q is equal to M, the mass times the specific heat of salt, times delta T, which is equal to T2 minus T1. So, unsa man nato na nga ang mabili na lang is ang T2 minus T1. So, we divide both sides by MC, or i-divide nato ang both sides by the mass times the specific heat of salt. So it would become T2 minus T1 is equal to Q over MC of NaCl. Then, para mabili na lang jud ang T2 na lang sa pikas na side, so atong add both sides of T1. So, T2, it would become T2 equals Q over MC of salt plus the initial temperature, or T1. Na after that, we just plug in the values. So, we have, naman ni siya atong formula, T2 equals Q over MC of NaCl plus T1. So, plug in the formulas, we get 615.342 joules over 1.07 times 10 to the negative 2 kilograms times 879 joules per kilogram Kelvin plus 310.15 Kelvin. Okay? So, okay? Do some magic sa inyong scientific calculator, and then you should get T2 equals 375.58 Kelvin. And then if ibalik nato na siya into Celsius, it should have the value of 102.43 degree Celsius. So did you get the same answer? So if not, again, i-review o giunsa ninyo pag-input sa inyong scientific calculator. Okay, so we will write the final answer, which is T2 equals 102.43 degrees Celsius. So now I've given you different examples. Unsay gipangita. So what to do if ang gipangita is ang heat, what to do if ang gipangita is ang specific heat, and then the unsay buhaton if ang gipangita kay final temperature. So I hope nga okay, you will take this to heart. So sayon ra siya, 'di ba? So i-review lang ang inyuhang algebra, of course, and then og giunsa ninyo pagbutang sa inyuhang scientific calculator because usually masayop gid mo dira na part, no, like just remember nga i-quantify ninyo, inigbutang ninyo sa inyong scientific calculators. And if you still have some confusions about this, you don't hesitate to go into the office into my office during my consultation hours, Monday 9 a.m. to 12 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Okay, so that's it for this video. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a good day.